Welcome to the Tarot Coven cast. Real people, real talk, real magic. Hey loves, Jasmine here. Just have a couple of things to mention before we get into the show. First up, I hope you're all healthy and safe at this time. You may notice that we don't really make mention of COVID-19 and the pandemic that's currently happening during this episode, and that's because we recorded this back in early March, and so that was before things really kicked off here in North America. We will discuss what's happening in further detail on our bonus episode for Beltane, which will come out at the end of April, but I just wanted to say right now that I hope you're all hanging in there and that, again, that you're safe and healthy. Secondly, I am so excited to share with you that I am an affiliate for this year's Tarot for the Wild Soul course taught by Mack. I'm sure you've heard me speak about both Lindsay and her course here on the show, and I honestly can't recommend the program enough. It truly changed my relationship with the tarot, not just the way I read the cards, but the way I approach my practice in general. Lindsay really opened my eyes to the idea that so much of what we know about the tarot has never been updated or restructured through the lens of our modern world. And she really works to change that by talking about cards in a way that makes them feel completely inclusive and accessible. You know, this is not your grandma's doom and gloom tarot. Lindsay demonstrates how each card is so full of medicine and of invitations to work with and through their energies. So if you're ready to dive deeper with your tarot practice, I highly recommend checking out Tarot for the Wild Soul. Registration is now open and classes will begin in May. And as a bonus, if you use the code WRITTENWITCH at the checkout, that's all one word, WRITTENWITCH, you're going to get a free 2-card PDF reading from me. Just remember to use the code WRITTENWITCH at checkout. There's going to be a handy dandy link in the show notes to make it super easy, and you will get that bonus 2-card reading. I just think that, you know, as the world undergoes this major shift, this course may be what offers you an anchor and a steady guide to ride the waves. Okay, thanks for listening to this intro and enjoy the episode. Hello out there, lovely listeners, and welcome to the Tarot Coven podcast. I'm your host, Jasmine, and joining me for this episode is the one, the only, Elena.
Hi, my love.
And we are here for the Coven's first ever pop culture hour. Although, knowing Elena and I, it's probably going to be like the hour and a half or the hour 45, but that just doesn't quite have the same ring to it as the pop culture hour. So that's what we're going to call it. But yeah, so for this episode, we have kind of a 3-act structure happening. So what we're going to start out with is talking about the kind of the TV shows, the films, the books, and music that really kind of piqued our interest in things like magic and witchcraft as kids and teenagers, you know, the stuff that really started to shape and influence our connections to these kinds of practices. And then in Act 2, we're going to chat about stuff that still brings us that same joy, that same kind of interest these days in like our present lives, and maybe even a few things that, you know, help us come back to these practices that sort of like guide us back, which I definitely have one of those that I'll be getting into. And then we're going to round everything out with a chat about the 1996 classic film, The Craft.
Yes, Soup's excited.
I know, so exciting. I think each section is going to have something pretty exciting to chat about. So,
oh, for sure.
Let's get started with a trip down memory lane. Now, when I was creating my list for this first section about like childhood and teenage years, it became clear pretty quickly that there was like a lot of sort of background influence for me, sort of things that were beginning to build this foundation for little baby Jasmine to kind of get more acquainted with magic and witchcraft and all that kind of stuff. And then there were a few like main players that really stuck out that were like basically grabbing me by the shoulders and shaking me, being like, you need to pay attention to this. Like, does that make sense? Like, I've got like, so for example, like the stuff in the background was like the Addams family. Like, that's not necessarily a supernatural or witchy kind of film, but it is this
Right.
kind of thing where it's like, okay, you're allowed to be weird, you're allowed to be unique, you're allowed to wear black, and the stuff that
Yes.
kind of sets you apart from the crowd is kind of what makes you cool, you know? And
Right.
then there was stuff like the witches in Sleeping Beauty.
Yes.
So just watching the three of those witches like change the color of the dress, there was something about like just the colors that were going on and the way that they were working together, and they were definitely doing some kitchen magic and stuff, and that was all really exciting. Even like Ursula from The Little
I
Mermaid,
love her. I
right?
just loved her.
Fascinating. And same
Like, as
thing,
much
like
as,
all the
yes.
colors and yeah, go ahead.
No, I'm sorry, because as much as
No.
like I love Ariel and I love the fact that like, I just love that movie in general, but I was always just so drawn to the magic of Disney, period, because I didn't really care about like the happy ending and if the, princess was going to end up with the prince. I wanted to know, why are they doing this magic? Like, I want to know what's going on.
Yes.
Like, I didn't really, care about the happy ending.
No, not at all. And in fact,
Oh no.
looking back as an adult, a lot of those stories are pretty bullshit because it's usually about a woman being saved by a man. So that kind of sucks.
Yes.
So I think it's really interesting when, in particular, I mean, I know I had phases where I wanted to be a princess and that was very
Same.
intriguing to me. But when I really think back, it was like, yeah, it was the three witches that really stole my attention and Ursula. I mean, that song where she's like doing all of her stuff at the
Yes.
cauldron. It's like, it's
Yes.
so fun. And then, of
Yes.
course, there's the 90s version of Sabrina the Teenage Witch, right? That was just
Oh,
like, it's nothing like the Sabrina that we have today, but it was so much fun and so cheesy and quirky. But
I
that's what I
love
mean about,
cheesy.
same, right? And I mean, that was
Right.
just so much fun. But that's what I
It
kind of
was.
mean by like the background. Like, none of those things were like, oh, I had to be like those things, or I mean, with the exception of maybe Wednesday Addams, because I did really dig a double braid and like a black dress for a long time, but
Oh, for sure.
right? Such a
And
good
speaking of
look.
Wednesday, my daughter loves her and was her for Halloween this past
Oh,
October. So,
perfect.
it was awesome. But do
Such an
you
easy,
remember?
good costume.
Oh yeah, totally. Like, and she has the attitude for it. So I was like, yes, perfect.
Mm-hmm.
Yes.
Little Leo.
Oh, I know. I know. But do you remember this show? I think it was called Out of This World. This girl had like these powers, and I think she was alien like. I'm not sure, but like she can freeze time, and I'm like, oh man, like those are the kind of
Huh.
powers I want. Like, and I can't like I remember watching the show, the episodes like religiously, but now that I'm older, I can't really remember exactly like what they were about, but I remember it's like this teenage girl and she lived with her family, but I can't remember now like how she came to that world, but she did have powers. So it's like any show or movie that had a young girl with powers like really drew me in. And there was another movie and it was this girl and she was kind of geeky and I can't remember the name, and I should know the name because I watched this like crazy every time it came on TV. And she meets this like witch, and the witch tells her, oh no, you've got this like, history of like lines of being a witch and all this stuff. And then she helps her discover her powers. Then she becomes popular and all this stuff. And then she just can like do all these things, and like change her life around. God, I wish I remembered the movie, but that was like, man, that was my movie.
I mean,
It
it's
helped me
kind
like,
of reminding me of Sabrina, like the actual movie of Sabrina, because it's kind of
yes.
similar, but I guess it's more her aunts are like guiding her. But yeah, so many good things. I mean, the Out of This World thing is reminding me of a show called The Secret Life of Alex Mack, I think. And she used to like
Yes.
turn into that like silvery goo. Do you remember that, or like liquid or whatever? And like
Yes.
for some reason I think she was caught in like nuclear testing or something. But I mean, I remember it being a little weird how she got her powers, but it was fun to watch her get in and out of like sticky situations by being able to just sort of like transform into this weird liquid.
Oh my God, I
But
remember that show. I would wait for that show to come on with my siblings and like I just love that actress, like in general.
yeah,
I always
yeah.
followed her after that.
I think she was in the Babysitters Club,
I think so too. Oh, I
right?
love that show.
Mm-hmm.
So like I love a lot of things like movies, books, and like TV and stuff, but I swear I'll forget the names.
Oh, fair enough.
But
Yeah. I mean, especially when we're
but
talking about stuff from our childhood, right? But
oh, for
but that's
sure.
kind of what I mean. So there's all this background stuff that was like kind of just there and kind of starting to shape and influence all of that stuff. But then when I was making this list, when I was making these notes for our recording, two things like really came out like loud and clear. And one of them
Mhm.
was Sailor Moon and the other one was
Ooh,
Buffy.
yes.
And it's like, that's okay. So Sailor Moon was, I mean, it's all about kind of planets in a way. It's like each of the Sailor Squad represents a planet. So you've got like Sailor Moon, Sailor Mars, Sailor Jupiter, Sailor Venus. I thought that
Mm,
was the coolest thing. And the idea that each planet had their own power, I don't know, that was just so intriguing to me. And it was the first, I mean, I guess I paid attention to shit like that in school, learning the planets and all of that kind of stuff, but I was never so into it in that way that the way that
right.
Sailor Moon made me into it. Like became fascinated with the planets and what they were actually like up to. And then I remember that my mom bought me like a little kind of like I think it was just like a little book and it was about being a Scorpio. And the thing that really drew
Ooh.
me in was the fact that I had a ruling planet. And so it was at the same time as me getting into Sailor Moon. And then all of a sudden I learned that, at least in terms of modern astrology, oh, I'm ruled by Pluto? Like, how cool is this? And then I wanted to know everything I could about Pluto. And of course, there's no
Yeah.
Sailor Pluto until like future season. So that always really bummed me out that there was no like Sailor Squad member to sort of represent me. But anyway, did you ever watch Sailor Moon?
I watched bits and pieces of
Yeah.
episodes, but I never watched it religiously like all my friends around me. But I remember watching it and going to school, and all the kids around me wanted to be everything about it. Like, so I remember everyone talking about it and wanting to be it. And then I'd go home and watch it and think, oh yeah, I get it. Like, because I would start thinking of other movies and other like Disney witches that I loved.
Gotcha.
Yeah, like it sort of made me think of stuff.
Yeah. And then so you were like, let me go watch those though.
Yeah, because I was more drawn because of how I grew up. My mom always rented like horror movies. I was always drawn into
Ooh,
like
yeah.
I know I was always drawn into adult like movies and adult shows.
Oh, fair
Um,
enough.
so like and anime, I respect anime, but I could never really get into it like my brother did. My older brother, totally still to this day will like, yeah, totally into anime. But for some reason, like it never drew me in.
I mean, there had to be some sort of special mixture of me thinking that the planets were fascinating, but also the fact that it was women kicking ass that actually
Fuck
let me
yeah.
get into that show. Because same thing, like I don't have a problem with anime. I totally respect if you're into anime, but it's not really my jam either. So it's definitely like it's the only show that I've ever religiously watched, let's say, that was anime.
Hmm.
So it has to be those other like magical elements that really drew me in. But
Yes.
I'm gonna guess that you watched Buffy though.
Oh God, the movie I did and the show, but the movie was what really got me like into
Interesting.
women kicking ass,
Yeah, yeah,
like
yeah.
you say, because I was like, oh yeah, if that ever happened, that's me right there. I'm gonna be the one learning how to stake these motherfuckers because I always knew like that there could be something like not vampires, but you never know, like some kind of apocalypse. I don't know, like
Sure,
because
sure.
you know, but I always thought in my mind, I always questioned it. So that movie drew me in. And then when they made the show, I was like, yes.
That's wild. I think so. You're like the second or third person that has told me how much they really enjoy that film. And like,
Hmm.
I didn't see it until, I don't know, maybe like season 4 of Buffy was on. Like, I knew
Uh-huh.
there was a movie, but it wasn't my entry into that world. So it just doesn't hold the same place, I guess, for me. Like, all my love is for the show. But I mean, I
Got
totally
it.
get it. The movie
No,
came out
that's totally
first. So you
fair.
probably, I mean, most people probably saw that first, anyways. But yeah, I mean,
Fair.
just watching, I mean, you're so right. Seeing this like one woman that was just totally in control, totally a leader, really kicking ass and just like not caring about what other people thought. And I mean, that was really inspiring, really uplifting. But there's something about Willow and Tara doing their Wicca and witchcraft shit together that was just, I
Willow.
mean, if the heart eye emoji was real, it would have been me while watching those two just like geeking out over magic and stuff. And God,
I love Willow.
yeah,
As much as I love Sarah Michelle Gellar, I've always wanted to be like Willow, like, because I was different. I wasn't like, at the time I was growing up, it was always about the pretty girls, the pretty skinny girls on
of
TV
course, yeah.
that were super popular. And I'm like, no, bro, I don't want to do that. Like, that's not my jam, you know? I like to be weird, and that's just how I grew up. And so, I was afraid to talk about magic and Wicca because people I thought around me were going to think I was weird because no one
Oh,
really
same.
around me, yeah, no one really around me was talking about horoscopes or talking about witchcraft. And when I would bring up horoscopes, it was always like, oh, how do you believe in that crap? Like that doesn't even sound like me. How, all this kind of stuff. So I never really had anyone to relate to about it.
No, me neither. I mean, I know like my mom has always been into that kind of stuff.
Yeah.
And she's definitely the one that like I said, she gave me that little book about being a Scorpio. So she's definitely the one that told me I was a Scorpio and probably even
Hmm.
introduced me to the idea of what a horoscope was. But in terms of friends, I mean, yeah, I had other friends that were into Sailor Moon or that were enjoying Buffy, but I don't know if it was the same way because we never had those conversations. Because even though I had seen things like the Addams Family and felt in my heart that it was okay to be weird, I don't know how much of that I showed at school. You know, at home and on the
Mm,
weekends, sure, I think I was more myself, but I don't know
same,
how much of that
same.
I brought into public space.
I couldn't bring it out in my public space because of where I grew up. It was
Right.
very like, yeah. So, but I remember just wanting to talk about it. And now that I think about it, my mom was the one who really introduced me to not witchcraft, but horoscopes. And I'm pretty sure there might be some listeners who know about Walter Mercado. If they're Hispanic and they grew up with having the Hispanic channels on all playing all day, there was this man and he was like this. He always had on like this makeup, like he always had on this clean face and he always dressed like a gypsy kind of, and he would tell you your horoscope and he would go each one by one. And, I would always be like, okay, what's he going to say about Sagittarius? Cause my mom was the one who told me I was a Sagittarius and I would wait for it, but he would say all this adult shit. Like, of course I'd be hella little, not like thinking I'm going to fall in love with whatever sign he was going to say was going to
Of
come into my
course. Yeah.
life.
Yeah.
And I took that shit to the heart. But, but yeah, that's the main guy that got me into, being a Sagittarius. And then I had one friend that I met in junior high who till this day we're still friends, but she was the one that was all about horoscopes and all about witchcraft and candles and stuff. So that was the only friend that I bonded with.
Oh, but that's so cool that you at least had that one friend though, Like so many, I mean, I didn't have any friends like that. Like it's not until adulthood that I have any friends that are into this kind of stuff. And I have to admit, I
Ugh,
think it's because I mean, I myself kind of was distancing myself from that kind of thing because it wasn't cool, and I was very
right.
much the kind of teenager that was concerned with being cool and fitting
Same here.
in, and so I really let go of a lot of things that,
Me too.
I really wish that I hadn't. Like, I hear so many interviews with people who are, reading tarot, or they're astrologers, or they're doing some kind of, or they own stores that are, kind of like metaphysical shops, stuff like that. And so many of them remember really getting into it at like the age of 13, or 16 or 18 or stuff like that, right? And
Mm.
some part of me wishes that I hadn't sort of turned my back on all of these things that were so fascinating to me, just so I could like fit in and be liked by boys, but
I know, it's so
such is life as a
stupid.
teenager. I mean, yeah, looking back, it seems
Pressure.
so hella stupid, but you don't realize that, I think, when you're,
You don't, because you're under so much pressure. Like for me,
yes.
if you didn't wear a certain brand or shop at certain stores, they would make fun of you on the bus to the point where like you would get your ass kicked. And I've
Yeah.
seen it. I saw it daily. I saw it weekly, people getting picked on, and like if you didn't sit on a certain spot in the bus, like forget about it. So I put away the love of the weird
Yes.
stuff that I liked, and I focused it on wearing the right Jordans, wearing the right jeans, all because I didn't want to get my ass kicked, which is
Yeah.
stupid as fuck.
And it's exhausting. It is exhausting
Very.
to live up to somebody else's idea of what's cool. And I just have so much respect and so much love for all the little weirdos out there that just stayed weird and just didn't
Hell yeah.
care and just like stayed true to themselves. Like, way to go.
Yes.
Good on ya. Hopefully
Yes, you
you can
guys are my
inspire other,
heroes.
yes, right? And hopefully they can inspire
Yes.
other people to just do the same, to just be you, because
Yep.
man, it is a lot easier to just be
Yep.
yourself.
Be weird. Just be respectful, but be weird.
Well, yeah, I mean, yeah,
Yeah.
definitely. I mean, don't be a dick about it, but
Right. Right.
yeah.
For sure.
Right? Well, so that's kind of all I've got from my childhood and teen years. What about you? Anything else that comes to mind that really started to get you interested in sort of witchy magical stuff?
Yes. Now, because like I said, these weird movies like that I would come home to
Mm-hmm.
watch too.
Yes.
There was this movie, and I know we were talking about it earlier in the week, and I couldn't remember the name, but now I figured it out. It's called Witchboard, and I think it came out in the 80s. But my mom used to always rent horror movies, and that was one of them. And it was about this Ouija board. And, of course, it haunts these people. I can't really, it was in the 80s, so I need to have to find it or remember it. But I was like, that's what I want to do. I want to play with a Ouija board.
Mm-hmm.
I want to know, like, if, I want to know, I know there's something there. Like, obviously they wouldn't make these tools. They wouldn't sell them if you couldn't like connect with something, that's there. So that movie was for me one of the ones that like really got my mind started to think. And then of course, the movie that we're going to talk about, I don't know if but The Craft was the one that really was like, okay, I need to go to a metaphysical store, and I need to buy some candles. I need to buy some books, because why do I want to know about this?
Yeah.
Like, why is it drawing me? Like, why do I not care about learning math or history or whatever? I want to learn about the history of witchcraft.
That's so interesting that you phrased the question like that. I love that. The fact that you were like, I need to go and find this book. I don't really even know why yet, but I want to know why. Like, I want to know
Oh
where
yeah,
this feeling is coming from. That's
it's
super
true.
insightful. I love that.
Thanks. Yeah, no. And then now that I'm an adult and I'm hearing stories about my family, I'm starting to realize that it's always been within me. When I discovered that I have a tarot reader in my family, in El
Oh.
Salvador. Yeah. And so, but what really kept me away from it growing up was my mom and her story about when she grew up and her brother doing like, I guess, he bought like the satanic Bible or something, how they make those kind of occult like dark magic books, but he was into that.
No, I
Um
did not know that there was a satanic Bible, but
yes, I've seen them. I've seen them at
I hope it's at
metaphysical
my local
stores.
library. I'll put it on hold.
Girl, it's there. And so my mom, when we got old enough to know this part of her life. She told us that he started conjuring up all these spirits and they were getting haunted, and my aunt would actually can see like shadow scary figures hovering over her. And I don't know if it was sleep paralysis, I don't know, but my
Right.
mom, right, but my mom, not my parents, but my mom and my aunts actually legit got haunted. And even my uncle has told me stories where he has seen like creaturey type shadowy figures appear to him when he was doing these things. And so my
Oh,
mom would, yes. So my mom would always say that this shit was real, that there was a devil, that there was demons. And so growing up, I thought there was shit like that,
right.
but it didn't scare me. Like I did not care. And I wanted to know why I did not care.
Yeah.
And when I was 14, I finally said, fuck this. And I went to, I think it was Barnes and Noble, and I bought a Wicca book. I bought a candle magic book and a tarot deck, not knowing what I was doing at
Ooh.
all.
Do you
Yeah.
remember what tarot deck it was?
It was the regular,
Just like a
Rider
classic
Waite
writer.
Smith.
Yeah.
Yeah. Now that I think about it, I think it's like the basic one that, Barnes and Noble sells now. I'm wanting
Gotcha.
to say, yeah, because it came in the box and everything, but I didn't know what I was doing. I was 14, you know?
Sure.
And every time I would shuffle, I would either get the devil or death or, and I'm like, what the fuck? So I was like, oh my God, what my mom said is true. There's demons. I'm going to conjure up a fucking demon. So I would put it away and like try not to think about it, but it kept drawing me to it.
Yeah.
It just kept drawing me to it. And then, I found rose quartz in my life, and that was it really. And I just kept going back to it.
Did you ever get a Ouija board and play around?
Well, funny story. My half brother, when he came to live with us, him and one of his friends brought one home, and so that's how I played with one.
Okay.
Um, yeah, but because my mom instilled the fear in us and found all my stuff and made me throw it all out, I would draw them.
Oh.
Yeah, she made me throw out everything because she was like, "Oh my God, you're gonna bring the devil in here." So I had to throw away my tarot deck, my books, my candles, like everything.
Oh
And
man.
it was a sad, tragic day. But she don't know that I mean I ended up buying another tarot deck after, like a few months after, but I just for some reason like the fear of just bringing something evil to my house just kept was there in the back of my head. So like I didn't get back to it till I tried to get back to it in my 20s, and then the
Yeah.
devil card kept popping up. So I'm like, huh. And so I let it go again. But I'm so happy I'm not letting it go this time. Not
Yeah.
ever. Not
Well, I mean, I
fucking
think it's
ever.
hard because when you're that young, I mean, I knew really early on that like religion was not going to be a thing for me, but I didn't
Yeah.
totally hate the idea that like sometimes before bed, my nanny and I would like pray together, but it was more like, hey, thanks for today. And, you know, we're going to be grateful to wake up again tomorrow. And there was something
Yes.
about that that seemed cool to me because I was like, oh, well, it's nice when you say thank you to people, you know, like there's nothing wrong with that. But the idea of going to church and eating some weird stale bread, that confession, I did actually like the taste of that bread. I sometimes wanted seconds. But the whole like organizational thing of it was not my jam at all. So,
Right. Like
yeah.
the whole thing about sharing wine from somebody
Mm-mm.
from one cup, like you gotta no, get the I am not drinking after some stranger. I don't give a shit.
No.
And I've never did confessions, but I did like the bread. But my mom always said, "Oh, you know, you can't get the bread unless you've done your confessions." So I only had it like maybe once or twice, but I hate no disrespect to people who go to church and have religious whatever, you know, but I
Mm-hmm.
hated it. I did
Yeah.
not like it.
It's not for everybody.
I was that one person falling asleep, and I'm not going to lie.
Mm-mm. No, it's not. Yeah. I mean, again, it's like to each their own. We would never turn away anybody that finds peace and inclusivity in religion. Like, that's great. And, you know, all the power to you. It's just not for everybody. But, you know, not everything
Right.
is for everybody. So,
Oh, right. Just like we're not for everybody, you know,
oh,
and that's cool.
100%. Yeah.
And
Like,
it's
if we just turned
totally
you off
cool.
with that conversation, I guess thanks for listening up until now. And we'll see you in another lifetime.
Yeah. Sorry, peeps. I love y'all though.
Yeah. Well, I think
Anyways.
I think that's a good place segue to move into stuff that we are appreciating now as an adult. Because now, so I sort of mentioned this in the intro, talking about how, you know, this section of the podcast will be stuff that we still find like that kind of inspiration in these days. But I also mentioned that there was something that kind of brought me back to everything, because as I was talking about, you know, like in high school and kind of even in my early 20s, being weird, quote unquote, or being into this kind of stuff was not something that was really on my radar anymore, because I was trying to really like conform and fit in, and I wasn't doing my own thing. But then like a couple of years ago, so like super late 20s, almost early 30s, this little show called Twin Peaks came into my life. And there's nothing, I mean, Twin Peaks has some supernatural elements, but it's not necessarily about magic or witchcraft in any kind of overt way. But there is something extremely weird about Twin Peaks, and it is a show that you know, it has characters, it has plot, but I think the most important thing about Twin Peaks is its ambiance and its mood and its tone and the way that it makes you feel. And it makes me feel like, again, kind of like with Addams Family, that like being weird is kind of really fucking cool. Like being weird is like the key to life, I think. And it's so interesting. I mean, I think I have to go into this in more detail one day when I can get all of my thoughts out on paper. But essentially, Twin Peaks is what led me to tarot, because like my mom my mom still reads tarot, and I knew about tarot when I was a kid because of her, but I just knew it. Yeah. I mean, but
That's dope. I didn't know that about mom.
Yeah. And like, honestly, all I remember is one time I went to touch her deck and she was like, well, you probably shouldn't do that, because she really believed in like the whole energy of it all, and like my energy's in that deck, and if you touch it, you're gonna like start fucking with my energy, and like, which I respect. I respect that. So that's all I remember really about it. Like I didn't know much else, but I knew it existed. I knew that it was like these cards with these imageries and archetypes and all that kind of thing. But so I like, getting back to Twin Peaks, just watching that show, I started listening to this podcast it's called Diane. If you're a fan of Twin Peaks, you've got to listen to this podcast. It's phenomenal. The conversations that they have are so, oh my God, so insightful. But one of the hosts started talking about tarot and started talking about how she had just ordered this Twin Peaks themed tarot. And I thought, oh, that sounds really cool. Like I would almost just even want to see the images, because at the time I was like just obsessed in general with Twin Peaks. I wanted everything Twin Peaks. So I go and I look it up, and it becomes this tab on my internet browser that never gets closed. Like it's this page just with all of the images of the deck, and I would stare at it at least once a day, if not several times a day. Like it just became this thing that I would, you know, make a cup of coffee and look at the images. And I just remember being so fascinated with the suits and then the major arcana. And I was like, all right, I think it's time to get my hands on one of these things. And unfortunately, the creator of that deck only did one print. And so I never made it in time. I never got that Twin Peaks deck, but I decided to just get another one. And in fact, I asked for decks as a birthday gift that year, and I did get one from my mom, and then it just spiraled sort of, I don't know, maybe out of control from there, because I just kept buying decks. But but it was definitely because of that show that I even entertained the idea of getting a tarot deck. So that's why pop culture is so important to me in that way as well.
Yes, for sure.
And then from there, like, very soon after, or maybe it was a little bit before, I can't quite remember, but I know that there was also an American Horror Story Coven themed tarot deck, and they didn't do a full, but they didn't do a full deck. They just did like some of the major arcana as certain characters from that season. But that had me losing my mind too because I had just started watching American Horror Story. So it was like all of these factors kind of happening at once. And then of course, I mean, you can't watch that Coven season and not want to be a part of a coven. Like, come
Oh,
on.
for sure.
You
Oh,
know?
yeah. That season made me want to find a coven. Like made me want to get
Right?
back. Yes, like it made me want to get back into witchcraft and tarot and all that stuff.
Same.
So
Like it was those
yeah,
two shows combined that really was
for
like the
sure.
road back for me. And yeah, ever since I saw Coven, I was just, and you know, it is interesting how that happens because it was like brought back into my sphere. And then I kind of put it out into the universe that I would really like to find women that were into that same kind of thing. And then lo and behold, like I find like you and Jesse and Jekanovia. And then if you guys know me from my other podcast, Damn Fine TV, like I found Mel's through TV, but one of the things that we really connect over is American Horror Story. So it's like, you know, I don't know. I
Oh
think
my
people are
gosh.
funky about if you have a spiritual practice, oh, you can't be into television or like, you know, it's like
That's
it's
BS.
kind of below you to be into that kind of stuff. You have to be
Right.
pure and like yada yada yada. And I'm like,
And you can't
mm-mm.
cuss. And I'm like, no, you know what?
Exactly.
I'm going to
Yes.
say motherfucker and I'm going to post a Jesus meme. I don't give a fuck because that's who I am. And if my soul's calling me to do it to make someone else giggle, I'm going to do it.
Of course, yeah. Well, so there's just two other shows that I wanted to mention, and then I've got a couple of like, I've got some music and some books that I also wanted to bring up. But for anybody looking for more shows that will kind of really get the tarot and astrology nerd side of you like really excited, I definitely recommend checking out The Magicians.
Oh,
I
I
I've been
know.
watching this. I think it started in 2015, and I mean I've always liked stuff, anything that was supernatural. I mean vampire shit and all that kind of
Yep.
stuff. Like it's always going to pique my interest. But I've recently started to do a rewatch, and something I never picked up on was that this show is really interested in the moon and astrology. And it talks about this thing
Mm,
called, like, for magic to work in this world, it is based on circumstances, which is essentially what's going on in the sky and where the planets are. And they don't like, some of it is overt and some of it isn't, but it is absolutely, it's so interesting to watch now that I have more knowledge of these practices and see how it's really shaping how magic is done in that world. So I think people will enjoy that. And then there's another show
mm,
called Dark on Netflix. It's a German show, but you can watch it. There's subtitles. They've also dubbed it, and it's not bad. Like the dubbing is probably some of the best dubbing I've seen. But it is really about like there is time travel involved, but it is really about living in a cycle and living in a spiral and kind of dealing with that way of living. And it asks you some really, or it kind of forces you to ask yourself some interesting questions about time as a concept. And I think that people who are into tarot, astrology, witchcraft, they're going to get something out of that too. So, what are you watching these days that kind of keeps you interested in this world or that you're like seeking out maybe because you're into this kind of stuff?
right now, I am not watching, I don't think I'm watching anything really that's keeping me into like my spiritual practices because I'm always like reading something or like watching videos on YouTube.
Oh yeah, fair
But,
enough.
but,
Well, if you've got music
um,
or books instead, then let's chat about that.
right. Well, like, yeah, cause I'm not really, I don't know if it's really witchy, but like I've always like liked books on, just like transformation and just people's journey. But and I'm sure you've seen The Becoming Supernatural by Dr. Joe Dispenza.
I
So
haven't.
I just started picking it up. Like I bought it a while back when Hay House had a sale.
Oh yeah.
But I just started picking it up again last night, and yeah, I need to finish it. Like it's just talking about transformation and how his synchronicities, his like visual, like he had this dream where he was like teaching about his spiritual practice, and then I guess it came true, and how he had this vision where this woman was talking about how he helped her, and then I guess like now it's all coming true. So it's like, I'm like, I need to, yeah. So I'm like, I like this kind of stuff, like, because I want to know more about law of attraction. I don't know, I'm stepping into it, but I want to know more of it. But that kind of stuff intrigues me. Like spell, you know how you read about spell work with words or journaling? Like that is what interests me. So I think that's why I've been kind of closed off to TV shows right now.
Yeah, fair enough.
But what does get me back into it, like when I'm really feeling witchy, and I know it's been on forever, but I always go back to Coven. Like I always go back to AHS, or I always go back to The Craft. Because I don't know, it just calls to me. But I know you have talked to me about The Magicians, and that is on my watch list. Like I know that's, but now that you brought it up, now that you brought it up, like I definitely want to get back into it. And I know that there's been other shows recently that I've watched, like, do you remember The Secret Circle on the CW?
No, what's that?
They only had one season. But it pissed me off that it didn't come back. But it was like, and you'll know the characters because the girl from Vampire Diaries, and then isn't it? She was actually from you know how they did the spinoff?
Oh yeah,
Vampire Diaries. Yeah. What was that? The spinoff? And then she's the werewolf. Yes, the originals. The girl that's the werewolf.
The blonde.
No, the brunette. But The Secret Circle, she's in that, and it's like these teenagers, and then I guess their parents were witches, but they don't know they're witches, and then they discover they're witches, and then they like try to hone in on their powers, and it was only on for one season, so I was like really bummed.
Aww.
So then when Vampire Diaries came back on, I was like, that was my jam too, because like I never missed an episode, because it was about supernatural, and it was about, and then Bonnie and her witchcraft, and
Bonnie
the show
was
Supernatural.
The best character.
Bonnie, hell yeah. I love Bonnie.
She was
Bonnie hands down.
Oh, just so phenomenal. So I used to write reviews for like an entertainment website about the Vampire Diaries, and pretty much like my reviews kind of just became me talking about how everybody else was a piece of shit and Bonnie was the best, because
love it.
Those were not friends. Like they were not friends to her. They were so awful to her, and she always was like sacrificing herself for the greater good and like doing everything she could to save people. And I was just always like, man, Bonnie is a better person than all of us, because if I had to put up with that much nonsense from my supposed friends, I would have been out of there with my witchcraft a long time ago.
Know.
Oh, she was just the best.
I know. She put up with Elena's shit. Like, she really did. She really, really did, with all of her drama and her boy issues.
Yep.
But I gotta say, I do love Caroline, though. I don't know why I love her crazy ass. But I have love for her. But I feel like they could have did Bonnie better, like with her ending, and the fact that she didn't end up with Enzo pissed me off.
She should have been with Damon, first of all. They had so much chemistry. Forget Damon and Elena. Damon and Bonnie were like, oh my God. Oh my God.
You're right. I forgot about that in they had all this tension, this fire.
So much sexual tension.
But with Damon though, like shit.
I mean, Damon's a shithead. Enzo definitely redeemed himself a lot more. So I was here for them being together. But yeah, she wasn't allowed that happy ending. So
I know, but that show, I want to say those two shows. There might even be like, do you remember Witches of East End?
Yes, loved that show. They canceled that one too.
I know. I'm like, you guys have got to be kidding me.
That one made me so sad. It ended on such a cliffhanger, I remember.
I need to rewatch, because it's been a long time, and to get to watch Jenna Dewan again, like, who doesn't want to watch Jenna?
So
She's
good.
so fine.
And
I know.
wasn't Madchen Amick in that? Like, she's also in Riverdale, and she's in Twin Peaks. Like, she was the aunt. So that's cool. I mean, I totally get going back to shows to kind of like re-find that inspiration almost, you know, or just like kind of like touching in, like when you go back to almost like going back to a deck you haven't used in a long time, but you know you have such a good connection with it and you just like want to hear what it has to say again.
Yes.
Yeah. Well, I also wanted to talk about a little bit of music, and maybe you can help me figure out what the heck I'm trying to say, because, okay, I think music can be magical. And I know that there are certain artists, like, I don't know, I might look to something like Florence and the Machine and think like, oh, she's such a witch type, or even like Stevie Nicks and say,
Oh my God.
yeah, like you guys are so, you fit that archetype, right? But when I think of like magical music, I'm really drawn to bring up somebody like Freddie Mercury and Queen. And there's just something about the lyrics of their music that I don't know. I don't know if it's because I'm a writer, and so what I notice about music oftentimes is the lyrics. And there's something about, it's like, yes, of course it's poetry. A lot of music is a kind of poetry, but I don't know. There's something about the way that it all fits together, the way that it all weaves together, where whenever I listen to Queen, I just kind of get into this zone where I feel like what's normally not possible is that much more attainable. Does that make any sense?
Yes. Like the energy behind the music that Queen produced, it's nothing like that I've heard before, because I feel like that group was so, I know they've had their issues, obviously, but like they were so about that heart loving, like, let's put the heart in and love into this music, because it's not just about us, it's about fans too. And the inspiration, like Freddie didn't give a fuck who at the time, how he dressed, how he acted. Like, he didn't give a shit, but he was pouring his pain into the music.
Yes. Or how he looked. I mean, so much of that feels so empowering to me. And I wish, like, man, it's still not easy for LGBTQ community, right? But I mean, it was even harder when he was around and trying to make a name for himself. And I wish he could have been more open about everything and just,
I know,
you know, like been able to share that side of himself a little more freely. But yeah, you're so right. The fact that he just didn't give a fuck and was just pouring everything of himself into making that music.
Right. And I'm not saying artists now and after don't do that, but
no.
I don't know. It's and you know, we hear other artists' tragic stories and they make their comebacks, but I just feel like Freddie never really got his comeback, and like
he didn't get the chance.
You know, and the lyrics to his songs just get me. Yeah, and I always felt a connection to him. And then the fact that when I got my dog and his name just happened to be Freddie Mercury Krueger, I'm like, what?
I'm like, this cute.
Is I know. I'm like, this is just too much. This is too much. So I've actually fell in love with Queen because I had a soccer coach that was obsessed.
Oh.
And that's all he would play during our hard games, like when we would have to play like tough opponents. That's the music that he would play to get us going. So I fell in love with Queen like at the age of, I want to say like 11 or 12 is when I fell in love with it. Yeah. Mm-hmm.
Well, what's so funny is that like I'm just getting into them for like the first time, but listening to their songs, I realize I've known a lot of them my entire life. I just didn't know that it was Queen. So like
Yes.
listening to them now,
Yep.
I know all the lyrics because I would hear them as a kid. Like my parents would be listening to them, or at like a
Same.
family function it would be playing or whatever. I just never knew that that's who was singing it. But now that I know,
Yep.
I'm like, holy, like this has been something that has been not integral, but like kind of shaping my life in that background piece once again, right? So I don't know, just
Yeah.
so fascinating. And so for the first time ever, I've been hearing about this for the past couple of years, but I know that there are people that will choose like a word of the year or a song of the year or something like that, right? And so for the first time ever, I chose a song of the year. And so I chose
Ooh.
Don't Stop Me Now. And so I listen to it once a day, if not more. I listen to it just to kind of get pumped up. I listen to it sometimes before we podcast, just to kind of like dance around and get like any
Ooh.
nervous energy out. I listen to it when something goes
Yes.
well. I listen to it when I'm in a shitty mood and I need that pick me up. But there's
Ugh.
something about the whole composition of that song, and I'm sure other people know what we're talking about when we say like you can
Right.
just lose yourself in that 3 or 4 minutes, and it's just like it's like you're on your own little island, and you come out of it feeling like, yeah, I am magic as fuck, thank you. Like I can go and create, and I can go and make this happen. And I don't know, maybe it's just a fact of boosting your spirit so you just feel more confident. And sometimes I think a lot of what magic is in the real world is just being confident, you know? So,
Oh yeah, for sure. And the one I love that you said you picked a song of the year because there's one song of Queen that I've heard it before as a kid, but now as an adult when I hear the lyrics, I'm like, "Oh my God, I can relate to that." And it's The Show Must Go On.
yes.
And I'm like, "Yeah, that's my jam because it's true no matter what, you just and you don't want to." And I can you can tell that that's him just that's his life.
Right.
Like it's like he doesn't want to live it the like he wants to live it his way, but some parts of him because of how he grew up he couldn't.
Sure.
And so that song, I love that song.
Yeah. And it's like the world that we all live in sort of dictates the way that you have to, I don't know, conform to certain things or just follow because that's the structure that we live in and there really is no other choice. Now there's ways to get around that, which is the show must go on, right? Like,
Mhm.
yeah,
Mhm.
figuring out how to do it your own way. But anyways, yeah, man, I just love it. I'm so glad that I finally did a song of the year kind of thing because it just really gets me in my
Yes.
zone. It gets me going. Yeah.
Exactly, because I love how Queen made those songs, but then they also made them upbeat so that they were getting out the problems of the
True.
world,
Yeah.
like under pressure, like would have that beat, that melody that you can like jam to, but it's real lyrics, like,
Oh yeah.
just them saying it's the terror of knowing, what the
Yeah.
world's about. So it's like, oh my God, like they're magic.
I think so too. You're right. There is something about packaging music that way, which I think is still done today. I think it's always been done, right?
Oh, for
And
sure.
it's a really good way of, well, I think because some people don't realize what the lyrics are and they're just jamming out to the beat, which is perfectly fine, right? But then you have that moment where you're like, oh shit, this is what this is saying? Like, wow. And then there's like this whole other depth of experience that you get with the song.
Right.
It's, yeah, and it's kind of mind blowing, or
Right.
it can be mind blowing, but
And I think people forget that these artists, they're essentially like creators or light workers. I don't even think they know what they're doing by the magic they're creating in their words and how they are inspiring someone from getting out of the darkness or
yeah.
stepping into something that they wanted to like. And I want to mention this woman's newest album that just dropped. And I sent you a song of hers, Janae Aiko.
Yeah.
Her album has been on repeat for me because her lyrics are so magical and every song on there, it's been a Three of Swords moment where I needed to hear it. And
Oh,
then, yes. And, and she, I guess for this album, she like, went in hermit mode in an island in Hawaii.
love
And
it.
so, yes. And so she stepped into her spirituality, her feminism, and then she incorporated a lot of meditative tones into most of her music so that she can deliver like some kind of healing to everybody that hears it. So I'm like, oh my God, this is what we need, is more artists that are like in tune with themselves and know that we need more light in this world, because this is how we're going to wake everybody up.
Gosh, that's so beautiful. And her voice is really, really beautiful. It's like, I don't want to call it easy listening, but like it is, because she's so inviting. I mean, I listened to that one track and then I listened to the whole album, and it was just such a great experience. I'm so glad that you brought up the idea of it being these Three of Swords moments, and then the artist going into like her hermit mode, because what I totally forgot to mention was that, to me, when I think of Freddie Mercury, I think of the magician, because I think of this person that was just using everything that they had available to them. They were using the tools in front of them to create something greater than this, like the sum of its parts, right? Like it just, there was such, I mean, and his name's Freddie Mercury. I know that's not his real name, but the magician is ruled by Mercury. There's something so communicative and magical and like alchemical about the whole thing. So I'm so glad you mentioned that to like trigger my memory on that one.
Yes, and she has a song called Triggered, and about things that trigger her and how she works through her triggers. And there's a song that really got me, and when it played, I'm like, this is a song that's going to go to my ex, but I don't want to text it to him. But I don't know if I want to record this because it's making me emotional, but it's that song, Pray For You.
Yeah.
Because that's the song that's my forgiveness song.
Oh, that's beautiful.
So that's the Three of Swords song for me.
Yeah,
and so
makes sense.
Yeah, so because, losing the one person in your life that you knew you had that love connection with is hard. And I know there's a lot of listeners that know that, and it's okay. You can play this. I don't give a shit, because it's who I am, is just being emotional and just, thanking people for letting me be emotional, because this is truly who I am. But that song, Pray For You, is just exactly the song that a woman needs to say to a man to let go of that. They don't have to stick to that like heartbreak energy, like sometimes if shit doesn't work out, it does not work out.
Yeah.
And you just have to let it go, and that's just, and I'm not saying that my ex was a terrible person. We just both came to an agreement that it's just not going to be, but it's just songs like this that are magic, that hit you so hard that you need to hear in the moment.
Yeah.
And that's what these artists do for me.
And I think there's something really beautiful about the fact that it has struck such an emotional chord with you, and it's helped you. I mean, it sounds like it's kind of helping you heal in a way. It's helping you move through. It's helping you put words around something that was otherwise just a feeling, right? And you're right, that is magical, because these people write these songs in a kind of an isolation. They record in kind of isolation. Like, this isn't a community project, let's say. Like, this is something that comes from within them, and then they put it out into the world, and they're not sure how it's going to affect people. But the fact that it's affected you in this way, there is something really magical about that.
Oh yeah, like I totally can. That was like the final healing point. Like, I'm like, okay, this is exactly the words I needed to get out, but do I send it to him, or do I not? I kind of want to, I mean, it's just hard,
Maybe
like.
It's just for you. It seems like
I think it's
just been a beautiful gift for you.
Yeah, and I'm going to leave it at that,
I mean,
because
that
at the
could
end
change, but
Right. Sorry, listeners. You just
my
got
gosh,
a raw, real listen of me. But
you're not sorry. Do not be sorry. Thank you for sharing that with us.
Oh, you're welcome.
You okay?
Yeah, I'm good. It's just, it's tough.
Man, when stuff hits you like that, it's, oof. That's why, I mean, you're braver than I, because there are certain parts of shows that I will not bring up because I know I'll just be crying. I'll be a mess. I don't even know if I could collect myself. So
Oh, believe me, I'm trying. Like I had to open my door up and get some air because
Yeah, let some
and look
energy
and look
in. Yeah.
out. Yeah, look out at the trees because that was intense.
Well, listen, I mean, I think that was really real and raw, and I think that a lot of people would get a lot out of that. But if you are feeling some kind of way about it after we finish recording and you don't want me to share it, it's totally up to you.
Nah, share it. I don't care. I don't care. It's the Sagittarius in me. We don't care.
Yes, but it's also your Cancer moon that's like, let me wear my heart on my sleeve and
Yep. Yep. It really is. It's that
yeah.
Cancer. Yep.
Well, listen, I got something that I think will help you shake off this energy and move into something else.
Yes.
What if we talk about that 1996 classic film, The Craft?
Oh, hell yeah. Let's talk about it.
Okay. So I have to set this up. Like, before we dive into a full discussion about it, I have to give some real talk here. So I have never seen the movie before yesterday. Never, not once, have I seen this movie until yesterday. So I was 32 years old when I saw The Craft. And it is a point of, or it has been up until now at least, a point of kind of like shame for me in a way. So to the point where people would talk about The Craft and I would be like, yeah, man, I love that part too. That's wild. Like, oh, me? Oh, I'm such a Bonnie. But I had no idea what I was talking about. No idea what those people were talking about. No idea what a Bonnie was. But I was just like, I want to fit in. Like, that's more of me, like, trying to do the cool thing, right? But
Right.
and then especially since I've like started identifying as a witch and people would bring up especially like Nancy or Sarah. And then more recently when there was that challenge going around, like, oh, describe yourself in 3 witches, I saw a lot of witches from The Craft coming up, and I was like, oh yeah, I totally know who they are, it's no big deal, whatever. And like so now I can stop lying about it, and I can say that it is a wrong that I have righted finally. It only took 32 years, but I did it. But yeah, so it like I kind of felt like it was a film that we had to talk about because so often I hear interviews of people that are into tarot or into astrology, and one of the first things that they always bring up is like, well, The Craft was a really big influence for me, and The Craft came out when I was like just around the right age to be really influenced by it. And so I was like, all right, it's something I guess I need to finally see and we need to talk about. So I watched it. You were super excited for me to watch it. And
Oh, hell yeah.
let me just say this. I thought it was a lot of fun. I think it's a little problematic, but it's like
messy.
It's like 24 years old. So,
Right.
I think it came out at a different time. I think that if I had seen it when I was younger, I probably would be able to overlook a lot of those things because it would have that nostalgia factor for me. But I did have a lot of fun with it, and I really liked the fact that they talked a lot about working with the elements. I thought that was really cool, like calling in the corners. Those are some of my favorite parts.
Yes, that was what actually got me back into buying candle magic books and getting back into Wicca, is watching them in their circle when they're out in the, like, I guess there's some kind of forest or some kind of field. Till this day, I want to do that with like my coven sisters,
But let's skip the whole like drinking each other's blood part, because
for real,
I'm not
much.
into it.
Especially with Corona, like you keep your blood to yourself.
Bring your own different cup. Times we're living in. Yes, bring your own cup.
Bring your own
candles.
cup.
Bring all your own shit.
For real. I never understood that. Like as a kid, when I watched it, I was like, yeah, no, I ain't doing that.
No. Anytime I see that in like witchy pop culture, when they're all like, when they're doing like blood ritual and they like cut their palms and then like put their hands together, I'm like, no, but this is how weird shit happens. Like, don't do this weird blood stuff. We don't need it. Like,
right.
But there were so many things I liked about the movie. Like, okay, first of all, it's full on 90s, which means we are in 90s fashion heaven. Like,
which is my favorite.
Oh my gosh, there was so much that was so much fun about it. Like when I saw a tiny backpack, I was like, yes, tiny backpacks. And then all the
Crop tops.
crimpy hair, the crop tops. It's like so grungy, so gothy. People are wearing Doc
Yeah.
Martens. I
Oh,
still wear Doc Martens, and
I'm about to
I feel
buy a
like
new
I'm the
pair.
only person. Yes,
No,
they
you're
look so
not.
good.
Yes, they do.
But anyways, it was lovely to see this fashion. I particularly was in love with Sarah's like long sweater jacket kind of thing. But it was also kind of a dress. I don't know. I was very in love with it. All the plaid. Ugh, the big pants. Those dudes wearing those big pants. Oh my goodness.
Yes, I
And
actually dated someone with those pants.
Oh, like just the best. I
Yes.
mean, it's just it's a look. It's the 90s fashion look. I just love it so much. It's like a cross between I don't know. There's a part of it that's like
70s in a
you
way?
yes, 70s and like I don't care what I look like, which I think
Exactly.
is the part that I really like because
Yep.
there's a lot of side bang or not even side bang, like parted bangs and the crimpy hair and like the hair clips and greasy hair and it was just
The
like roll
Aquanet.
out of bed. Oh, so much, so goodness.
Yes.
Like
Too much goodness. Too
mm, mm.
much. The plaid
I
is my
had
favorite.
Yes, I had so much fun just watching everybody's outfits and the color palette in general was so much fun. It was so like moody, but like also kind of bright because I'm pretty sure it's taking place in California, right?
Right,
So
somewhere, yeah.
you can't help but have the sun and like some of the natural stuff that's happening there, but and then the last kind of like overall thing I wanted to say is that I keep forgetting that Skeet Ulrich is in this movie. So when I saw his beautiful little baby face, I lost my mind and I was like, "Oh, I'm in for a treat, I see. It's Nev Campbell and Skeet Ulrich. Like this is amazing."
Girl, I was just gonna tell you, my that's one of my favorite parts of watching this movie now is seeing all these characters that I grew up watching,
Mm.
Like Breckin Meyer. I remember,
Yes.
yes, like I remember falling in love with him on Nightmare on Elm Street. I think he was on one of the final ones.
Oh.
Yes. And so that's when he was in this, I was like, oh, I know him. And then Christine Taylor, she was such a bitch in this fucking movie. And I never liked her in that movie, but I've seen her in other things. And I remember growing up as a kid, Nickelodeon had that show, Hey Dude, and she was on that. So I was like, oh, I know her. But she is such a bitch in this fucking
Oh my God, she's
movie.
the worst.
So when she loses her hair, I was like, yep, that's what you get, you dumb hoe. Because I was like, don't be fucking
Right?
with Rochelle.
I mean, at first, I was like, yeah, well, you shouldn't have been such a stupid bitch. But it does
Exactly.
obviously go too far. That's like kind of part of the concept of this movie is that
Right.
these girls, like these high school girls, finally find their fourth so they can properly call in all the corners. And then they start getting like real magic. Like they're doing real, like, let's call it supernatural type magic, right?
Right.
And they're coming into their powers. They're realizing how insanely powerful they are. It like totally changes kind of who they are in a sense too. Like they're getting cocky, they're getting like kind of mean themselves, like they were the
Right.
ones that were made fun of before and then all of a sudden they're like, you know, the mean girls in a sense. And it's obviously like this story of too much power and sort of not enough responsibility or care that comes with the power.
Right.
And
No
I mean,
respect. No
no,
respect for the
exactly.
craft. And
That's a
like,
good word for it.
yep.
Yes.
No respect for the elements. No, like, they're not
Yes.
doing it for the right reasons. And then, like, Sarah kinda already naturally has it in her that it's for good, but I think she just wanted to
Mm-hmm.
fit in somewhere that she just went in with the outcasts. Like, naturally I would have. But,
Oh, yeah.
for sure.
And I think she was having fun, and I think it was nice for
Exactly.
her. I mean, one of my issues with the movie is that there's not enough character development.
Yes.
I think this still would make a really fun TV show if we could get to know more about the girls in the coven because we don't
Hmm.
really get a lot of their motivations, let's say. Like it's very surface level and it works for the length of the movie. It was a lot better than I thought it was going to be based on the fact that it came out in the mid 90s.
Hmm.
So, but I wish that we had known more about like, I mean, everyone's background, but Sarah's background a little bit too, because I do get the
Yes.
sense that she never really had many friends, and so it was nice for her to connect with these girls. But I kind of wanted to know, like, what was the deal with Bonnie's burns?
Right.
Who even is Rochelle? Like, we get nothing about that girl, and
I know. It
that's the
bums me
most
out.
problematic part, because she's like the only woman of color in the crew, and we get the least information about her. So that sucks.
Honestly, we get nothing from her. It's like, why is
No.
she like, why did she get into witchcraft? And it's like, we understand Nancy's point of view, and I get Bonnie. And what I love about Bonnie is she has these burns, and she's very ashamed of her scars. But I love the moment when Nancy's performing Reiki on her. Basically, she's like,
Right.
moving her hands on her back, and just like, you can tell she genuinely cares that her friend's deeply upset. Like, in that moment, you see Nancy actually care about something.
Yes. Yes. I so agree.
And that's right there. I love that moment. That was like one of my favorite moments. And actually, like, now that I see it and now that I am into Reiki, I'm like, oh my God, she's trying to heal her. Like, that's what that was.
Yeah,
It had to
absolutely.
be. Had to be.
Oh yeah. I mean, it was definitely some kind of healing magic, whatever they
Whatever.
might have wanted to call it. Yeah.
Right.
But yeah, so I definitely wish we had gotten more about them, but I mean, gosh, it was such a fun movie to watch. I had such a good time. Like I said before, every scene where they were calling in the corners, I just was like, oh, I want to do this. Like you were saying, wanting to go out to that field with your girls and be able to do it. What's crazy is that I definitely knew about Light as a Feather, Stiff as a Board, but I didn't know that it came from this movie. And in fact, I
Oh,
tried it with friends as a kid. Of course, it didn't work,
same.
but I didn't know. So one of my friends must have seen the movie and then told us about it. But so when I saw them doing it, I was like, holy shit. Like I did this as a kid. Like, is this a common thing? I don't know. I don't know if it just came from this movie or if it's around,
Right.
like, I don't know, but it was so cool to see. So now I feel like I gotta like find that girl who brought it into my life and be like, listen, what age did you watch The Craft at though?
I know, right? Because I feel like we all tried Light as a Feather, Stiff as a Board, and I've only heard about it from that movie.
Okay,
So,
yeah.
yeah. And as a kid, I tried all kinds of crap with my siblings and my friends. Candyman, Bloody Mary. We tried all that
Oh,
stuff.
Bloody Mary. Yes, of course.
Of course.
But yeah, like Light as a Feather was such a like sleepover activity. Like I
Yes.
feel like no matter what, if you were a group of girls getting together and you were together like late at night, you were trying Light as a Feather, Stiff as a Board.
Oh, for sure.
All right, what else? Okay, there were a couple of quotes that I really, really liked from the film. So, more of a funny one. So, I also never knew that We Are the Weirdos, Mister came from this movie. So, that was really
Oh,
fun to
yeah.
see. Because even though I've seen like memes and stuff on Instagram or whatever, I had no idea that this was the origin. So, that was really fun to find out. And then I love when Nancy like kind of walks off in a huff because everybody else's spell is starting to work out. Like Sarah's spell to kind of hook Chris is working, and Bonnie's scars are gone, and who knows what Rochelle's thing was because we never really get into it. But Nancy like goes off in a huff, and they're like, "What's wrong with her?" And Rochelle's all, well, she doesn't want to be white trash anymore. And I told her, you're white, deal with it. And I was like, yes, yes,
Yes.
Rochelle. Real
Yes.
talk.
That was my favorite quote because she's like, well, I told her, honey, you're white trash, so deal with it. Because
Yeah,
in the real world, hello, she's a woman of color, so she's got to deal with a lot of crap.
exactly. Yeah. Oh, Nancy doesn't want to be white anymore. Oh, no.
For
So,
real.
yeah, I love that because, I mean, there was like, yeah, like we've been saying, there's been so little development of Rochelle in general. So I at least really appreciated that she got to say that line. That was at least something for her character. But My favorite line of all, the whole movie, comes from, I didn't get her name, but like the shopkeeper.
Oh yes, I love
So
her.
she says to the girls one time when they're in the shop, she says, true magic is neither black or white. It is both because nature is both, loving and cruel all at the same time.
Yes.
And I just like, I paused and I had to rewind and listen to it a few times. And I was like,
Same.
thank goodness, because there is a lot of this movie that I think gets witchcraft wrong, let's say, but this is truth. Like, this is real. This definitely gives it a better look. And when I say gets it wrong, what I mean is that, like, most of the movie is based on women fighting each other and like manipulating people. And like, so I feel very conflicted about all of that. But I think that at the heart of things, like if you can focus on that quote, that gets it. And that made me really happy to hear her say that.
I love that you picked that up because I wrote that quote down too when I rewatched it. And what I love that she said too was that there's like no good or bad no good or bad magic. It all lies in the heart of the witch. I'm like, yes. I'm like, that's so fucking true. Because all of us, we can be, into witchcraft and perform spiritual practices, but you can be an asshole, and that's not who I am. I know that's not who you are, but it's like when you bring in that negative energy into your work, you're just drawing in negativity to you. And so it's like, I don't want to say there's dark magic, but I want to say there's like negativity around it too, depending on what your intentions are with it.
Oh yeah, for sure.
Yeah.
And I just think that like, I don't know, even the wording around it, like white magic and dark magic or black magic. Like, I mean, that's inherently problematic and we shouldn't be thinking about it in terms like that. Like it really is whoever is setting the intention and creating their magic. Like if you have shitty intentions and you want to hex somebody, then you're kind of a shitty person. Like, sorry, but
I don't believe in that
so
shit. Because of the one thing though that I did love about this movie was the whatever you send out, you get back times 3. Because before I heard that as a kid, my mom would always say like stuff like, whatever you do, you're gonna get it back, or karma works in ways that you can even get it later on in life and it can happen to your kids. And then you see, my mom scared the fuck out of me. Okay. So
I mean, it's pretty good common sense though, just to say like, what goes around comes around. Like you can't put shit out without getting some of it back. Right. So, and I mean, unfortunately, some of the time, no matter how good you are, like just the world that we live in, it doesn't mean that you get goodness back, but just don't be an asshole.
Right. I mean, and unfortunately moths are attracted to light, and when there's people that are just full of light, they get people that suck them dry.
True. Yeah. But I really appreciated that shopkeeper was like, I don't know, she just had so much real talk and real like good things to say that I think hopefully people who watched that movie, or hopefully people who did watch that movie, like that's what they sort of cling on to, because that feels the realest out of everything, right?
For sure.
Because like I'm even conflicted about Chris's death, because on the one hand, murder is bad, right? Obviously. But I think we should crush the patriarchy and all of the misogyny that it breeds. So, like, I don't know. He kind of sucked. Like, he definitely was going to rape Sarah. He was definitely an asshole to women in his high school. We need to raise our boys and men better. But, like, I'm just so conflicted about so many of the things. Like, I wish that this movie had been something about, like, women sticking together and not manipulating magic to hurt other women. And I don't know. It would have been nice if it was more diverse. The god that they were calling on, it would have been really cool if they were calling on like Hecate or something, like a goddess instead of a god. Like it seemed like they were putting all of their power into this like male figure. And
you're right.
Right? So, but yeah, so there's just, I mean, as much fun as I had with it, and I mean, I would definitely watch this film again, because I think that there was probably a lot that I missed in terms of the actual magic that they were doing. Like I think there's more that I could pick up on and be like, "Oh, that's so cool that they're doing that," or like, "Oh, that's so interesting." Like, I don't know, just specifically like when they're calling the corners and stuff, but
Mhm.
I don't know. I kind of hope that either it's updated as a film and made a little bit more diverse, a little bit less about women attacking women, or maybe a TV show that's kind of based on the same kind of concepts that sees like a little bit more community focused type thing. That would be a lot of fun. But you can't really recreate the 90s of it all, and you can't really like tap into that moody sort of grungy energy. So
I
I
love it.
definitely, yeah, I mean, I'm super glad that I watched it. And yeah, I don't know. Any kind of final thoughts about the craft?
One part I just still to this day don't really understand is that whole homeless guy in the beginning.
Oh
And
my God, yes. I can't believe I forgot about this.
I'm like, what the fuck? Like, how did you get to this house out in the country, but then now you're in the city? Like, what?
Yes, and I thought it was going to have a much bigger impact. And I guess like
Same.
it kind of started things for them because they were all thinking at the same time that the car was going to hit this guy. So maybe that was like their first
Maybe.
taste of like, oh, this is going to work. But still, what was the deal with the snakes? Oh, and that's
Yes,
the
the
other thing.
snakes.
This movie has way too many snakes. It has way too many rats, way too many spiders. Oh my God, that scene when Nancy is like doing all of that, like,
Oh,
sort of, yes, like the visual manipulation for, oh my God. I just kept screaming, no, ew, no, ew. Like I
girl.
was just not here for it.
Till this day, I look away. I don't want to really see it
Mm,
because when
mm-mm.
I first saw it, I was like, what the fuck? And I was freaking out because I have a major, major like fear of spiders, but they followed me my whole
Ugh.
life. And I'm now that
Oh,
I'm,
so same for snakes then with me.
oh, and it might be
Like
something to
exact
look
same.
into. You might want to look into it
I know, right?
because someone told me two people told me within the IG community that it's that I need to follow it because like it's a I guess the spider is a huge like has a huge psychic meaning, like the spider goddess. And when I was at my local botanica, I found a altar candle for the spider goddess. So I was like, I'm buying this.
Oh.
And I always will find a spider roaming around my altar, and I'm like, get the fuck out. But I'm like, but it's like I don't want to kill it now, you know?
Right. Yeah. Yeah.
Because I know that they're there for a reason. But
Well, I know, and so often, like the snake is either correlated with the death card, which is the Scorpio
mhm.
card, or it's
Ooh,
correlated with Scorpio, or there's always something that I find, oh, like what's the animal connection here? And I'll look it up, and it's always a fucking snake. And I'm just at the point where I just roll my eyes, and I'm like, yeah, whatever, though. Like I cannot, because they just creep me out so
I
much. And I've
know.
tried, like I'm trying to be more open to it and trying to
Same.
be at least like, okay, what are they symbolic of? What does the imagery mean? Like I'm not going to have a snake. I don't want to hang out with snakes, but I'm willing to like entertain what they might mean. But yeah, I thought that guy was going to have such a much bigger impact on things, or that snakes were going to come into play in more ways than just being used as like a like yeah, to manipulate and kind of horrify Sarah there at the end. So I don't know, it was weird. Hey, did you feel like when at the beginning scene, because it opens with the three, like with Bonnie, Nancy, and Rochelle kind of doing like a little, I don't know, summoning circle kind of thing.
Yeah.
Do you feel like they called Sarah?
Oh, you know, I love that you said that because I think that they were throwing that intention out into the universe.
Right? Yes.
Ooh, that's deep.
That
That
was
made
like
me
their
get
new moon
chills.
intention.
Yes, like, and I love that you had mentioned it earlier in the episode that you had said that you wanted to draw in only people that were like you, and that's how you met people in the community and on IG.
Yeah.
That's when I first started posting tarot stuff. I sat down and meditated, and I only wanted to like bring in people that like tarot and like things witchy and stuff. And that's how I started meeting people and like you and Jesse and
Yeah.
Genovia and my soul coach. And so now that you say that, yes, I think that's what they were doing. I think they were calling, I think they were asking Manon to send the fourth.
Right? Because that's like their big talking point at the beginning. And oh my gosh, I love when Bonnie is reading and she goes, the almanac says today brings like
yes.
good things. I was like, yes, the almanac. That's so cool.
Yes, I know. When she said that, when I was rewatching it, I was like, yes, because I have an almanac. So I'm like, yes.
Oh, amazing.
Yes. And I post on it sometimes. Because sometimes like I'll find it and I'm like, oh my God, it's really cool, like what it says, you know, because
yeah. Oh yeah, I've seen it in your stories.
yeah, because they'll have a color of the day, and then when I look at the color of the day, I'm like, holy shit, it's the color of the stone I have in my boob, and I'm like, how cool is that? So I love it.
Yeah, there were so many little neat things like that that just got me really excited. And I was like, yeah, no wonder there are so many women now of like our age, a little bit older, that are so into this stuff because the craft would have been a total jumping off point.
Oh,
Like,
for
I mean,
sure.
it's a connection with nature and with like energies and stuff. And I mean, at least for a good portion of the film, it's these women finding each other through their shared weirdness, through their shared like otherness, right? And coming
Right.
together and you know, changing their lives through this dedication or this willingness or this intention. And yeah.
For sure. And it's
So
just women using their intuition. Like they just knew she was the fourth because they had that little moment where they called it in. Then she shows up at the school and they were like, that's it. That's her.
yeah.
I love
Yeah.
it.
Yeah. And I mean, I guess it definitely is like a good cautionary tale for how not to use your magic, right? Because you definitely, as cute as Skeet Ulrich is, you do not want him following around to the point of obsession.
I know.
So, you know,
I love
and
that part.
I think,
I'm sorry, but I love that part when
no.
he's like at the middle of the night calling her at her window and the dad's like, can I help you? And he's like, no one can help me. I'm like, same. That's how I feel now.
I know. And like before it gets, you know, before it goes to the inevitably dark place that story was going to go to, when he's like talking about how he just woke up one day and he's just kind of, I think I'm just in love with you. And I don't know, like I have to be with you. Like, does that make sense? And she's like, no. And he's like, you're right. I was just thinking how that doesn't make sense.
I know, it's so creepy now. Like even,
It is. Yeah.
even back then when I watched it as a kid, I'm like, ew, like I wouldn't want, that's weird. Like I always thought it was weird. Like,
Yeah.
of course you always want that fine ass guy to like you back, but not in that weird ass way.
Not to be your stalker.
Totally. I mean, you can hold my shit, don't be wrong. I mean, like, you can hold my books if you want. But
Well, I mean, that's when it was still fun, right? Because
right.
it's harmless to make a
Right.
guy carry around your books and your book bag and all that kind of shit. So who cares? Also, he was awful to her and
Oh
spread that
yeah.
rumor. And so it's
No,
like,
what a dick.
I understand a little bit of revenge, but obviously it was power that, like you said before, went unrespected and went a little too far. And yeah.
Yes. You can't mess with the divine.
Mm-mm.
She's a powerful bitch.
Yeah. And wait, so now I'm trying to think. Okay, so it just ends basically where Sarah still has power, but nobody else does, right? So
Right.
I guess we're to assume that, did she call, like, because she invoked the spirit, she called
Right.
upon Manon, but she also had power before any of them did. Like, she was a quote unquote natural witch. So do you think, I mean, it's 24 years old, so I'm sure there have been lots of opinions and lots of like deep dives into this, but do you think it's just still her power, or do you think she's like still kind of charged up?
I think Manon opened her up to her true power. Because you know how she was
Oh,
hella scared of it and she was
yes.
so scared of it, but she knew deep down that there was something different about her. And I think she just said fuck it and trusted the divine and just said, I'm gonna invoke the spirit. And so I think that Manon saw that. I mean, I don't know, but I think that he saw that. I hate that I say he, but that he saw her a white light and doing this for good. So I think
Mm,
that's why he let her keep her power in a way, but I don't know if she's still charged up. I just think I
gotcha.
just think maybe she knows how to control it now and knows what to do with it. But I really wish they would have, like you said, dived into her story more, because you know how she's talking about in the very beginning, like, oh, do you know when you just wish I wish it would rain, and then all of a sudden a pipe bursts in my room and my room would get
Right.
flooded. Like, how do we know
Yeah.
she's really being real or she's making that up to fit in? Because it would be really cool that maybe that's why she was always a loner, because weird shit kept happening with her thoughts, and she probably thought she was weird and crazy, and maybe that's why she
Yeah.
had a small circle. But then when she
Mm-hmm.
met these girls, that's why maybe she wasn't really totally afraid of it, because maybe she could relate to it somehow. That's why I wish this movie would have dig deeper into that.
No, I totally agree. I think, yeah, I mean, how great would it be if it was a television show, because they would have so much more time to dive into each of these characters and really do them justice in terms of like backstory and the right kind of motivations for things. We would understand. I mean, we get an idea of why Nancy does what she does, but I think it's a little cliche. I think they could have dug a lot deeper, but then again, it's the length of a film, so you only have so much time, right?
Right.
I mean, I've said pretty much all I wanted to say. What about you? Any final
Same.
thoughts on the craft?
Oh, you know what I wanted to say earlier is, what I do remember after this movie was released is MTV made a huge, it was huge.
Yeah.
And I guess back then, because it was in the 90s, so they didn't have the budget for it. So I guess Sony gave them the budget to do like all the special effects with the snakes and the spiders and all that stuff and the
Oh
fight
yeah.
scene. So I guess like the fight scene was like really big at that time. And I remember it winning awards. Like I remember watching, because as a kid I loved watching the MTV Movie Awards, and it won awards.
Right.
So
Yeah.
it was
Oh,
pretty
cool.
awesome. Yeah. And I also want to know, who the fuck is Connie Francis?
Connie Francis.
Because you know the mom, when they get rich, when the
Oh yeah,
stepdad
the
dies, the
jukebox. Yeah,
jukebox.
yeah,
And I'm like, who
yeah.
in the F is Connie Francis? I still don't know who Connie
Nope.
Francis
No idea.
is. Listeners, can
That's
you
so
help a girl out?
funny. Well, we're gonna have to look her up and see what she's all about.
For
I
sure,
can't.
because
She must have enough of a catalog to fill a whole jukebox. So,
now I'm wondering, was she a witchy witch like Stevie Nicks? Now
ooh,
I'm wondering. I want to Google her now.
man, that would have been so much cooler if they said it was a jukebox full of Stevie Nicks. Although I don't know. I don't
Fleetwood
know about
Mac, Stevie
Nancy's
Nicks.
mom's tastes. Like, I think she was not
She's a
into the
mess.
same kind of like cool witchy stuff. But you never
Oh
know. You
no,
never
you
know.
never know. Doesn't she lightweight remind you of Mean Girl's mom?
Oh my gosh, I can't remember Mean Girls' mom.
Oh, I
Listen,
think
I
you watched
told
Mean
you
Girls.
I blocked out Mean Girls because they gave that girl my last name, and I'm not
Oh,
here
that's
for it.
right.
I'm not here for no Regina
Oh,
George.
I know. It's all good. But I think I'm gonna put on some Connie Francis later and see who she is.
Nice. Well, you'll have to report back and let us know.
I know, right? But who knows? I may put on some Freddie Mercury. I'm not sure.
Yes, I'll definitely be doing that at some point. I mean, I already listened to it a little bit before we started to record. I like to put it on and just get out all my nervous energy and just like channel it
Same.
through the dancing. So,
Janae's Define Me is my new get that energy out.
oh, yeah.
That's my
Nice.
newest.
Well, that was so much fun. So, as I said
Same.
at the top of the show, this was our first ever pop culture hour because we're definitely going to do this again at some point throughout season one, probably closer to the end of season one. And I'm not sure what we'll do if maybe if there's a film that comes out that we all really want to talk about, or a TV show, or maybe we'll just come together and talk about like some books that we're reading. I think that Jesse and Jekanovia are more like book and music type people, which is totally fair. So maybe we'll figure out something that all four of us can talk about. I did have a couple of books that I had wanted to mention, but time just didn't really permit. So maybe I'll bring them up on that second episode. But listeners, if you guys have any suggestions or topics like within the realm of pop culture that you would really like to hear us chat about, you really want to hear our thoughts on, we are so open to that. So get in touch with us. You can find me on Instagram at the.written.witch, and you can send me an email as well. It's just writtenwitch@gmail.com. If you ever have any suggestions for the show, always feel free to DM me as well if that's easier for you. And what about you, Elena? Where can everyone find you on social media?
I am at Mars _ Elena _ Lightworker, and you can also email me on through my website at elenalightworker.com.
All right. Well, we will be back in a couple of weeks for another episode. Thank you so much for listening. We'll see you soon.
Bye.
Thank you so much for listening to this episode of the Tarot Coven cast. Stay tuned for our next episode all about reading with reversals. And until then, everyone, keep making magic.